Hello and welcome to the Jumpstart Podcast with Jeffalytics. I'm your host, Jeff Sauer. Today, for our 43rd episode, we're going to try something new. Instead of doing an interview, it's just going to be me talking during this episode. But I'm hopeful that you'll find this talk to be both interesting and inspiring. Now, if you're only coming to this podcast for the interviews, then it's okay to sit this one out and check back in 2 weeks for episode 44, where we will be back to our interviews. But before you do that, I should probably introduce the topic for you, and you can make the decision if you want to stick around or not. Now, this podcast runs every 2 weeks with interviews, but I've been thinking for quite some time about adding a second episode to the rotation, so basically every week. And that second episode would be focused on a single topic that I find interesting in the world of marketing and analytics, and occasionally even talking about the world of entrepreneurship. These episodes would likely be a little bit shorter than our hour-long interviews and take a more conversational tone. So let's call this episode my first attempt at this new format. Since the Jumpstart podcast has been talking about the journeys we take in our careers, I wanted to talk to you about some of the things that I've learned over the past 3 or 4 years in my own journey as a marketer, an analyst, and even as a business owner. Now, why this topic and why right now? Well, when you listen along, you'll start to understand what we're talking about, and hopefully you'll find this to be useful in your own path. And also, I'm so busy working on the launch of my latest course, the Agency Jumpstart course, which you can check out at agencycourse.com, that I didn't have time to get a guest lined up. And that's just me being completely honest with you. Okay, so let's get into it. I'm going to rewind back to 5 years ago. The year was 2012. I was about to get married. My agency was doing fantastic. We were growing revenues by millions of dollars each year, and we had a pretty nice profit margin. I think we had just hit number 868 or something like that on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing businesses in the United States. The things we had been struggling with in the past, they started to become easy. So easy that my agency was looking for our next challenge and our next sources of revenue. And I was also searching for new challenges for myself. Now, I'm not going to get into the company aspect right now, but I am going to talk about some of the personal areas where I sought out growth. One area of personal growth was to become better at business development. I wanted to reach more clients for our business, and I wanted to expand from doing regional business development to something on a national level. Now, looking at other people who were successful in this area, it seemed like speaking at marketing conferences was a really good way to drum up interest, get your name out there, and to get people interested in your business. And since I had been doing speaking engagements in Minnesota and I was bringing up my profile locally, I thought that it would be pretty easy to get in and go on a national level. So I started applying to speak at conferences like the SMX conference and other well-respected conferences, and every application I submitted was denied. Every single one of them. I felt like a loser because when things don't go my way, that's my natural reaction. You know, if I run into a wall, I'm just like, oh man, what a loser. But then I try to break through that wall as quickly as I can. So even though I had built up a fairly decent reputation locally in the Twin Cities, it was all built under the brand name of my company, 3D Marketing. There was really no concept of Jeff. I barely had a Twitter account at the time, and I was using the company's name for all the different marketing that I was doing. So I built a nice brand for the company, but I didn't exist. Nobody knew who Jeff was. And so I was getting rejected for every speaking gig. Basically, every time I tried to jump out of my local area, I got denied. And I figured that the only way that I could get noticed was to start making a name for myself. Naturally, if they don't know my name, I needed to make a name for myself. So I started this blog with my name in it to get noticed. And that's where Jeffalytics was born. It was September of 2012. And yes, it really is that lame, the genesis story of Jeffalytics. But it started to work. Publishing really strong content, put my name on the map, and eventually I did land the speaking gigs on a national level that I was looking for. It started as early as in 2013. Now, around this time, my passions shifted away from the business of providing consulting services to companies and more towards going into business for myself. You see, I was getting tired of clients not buying into my $1 million ideas. I couldn't understand what they had against making millions of extra dollars by implementing my recommendations. Who doesn't want $1 million? And no, I'm not just throwing numbers out there. I took over marketing for a business unit of my client back in 2008, and it was an e-commerce store that was making about $1 million a year. The next year, I basically turned it into a $3 million business by increasing their spend on Google by about $100,000. And this type of success was happening over and over again. Basically, if a client would let me implement my ideas, I was able to show them tangible results. And since it was e-commerce, the results were speaking for themselves. And it's funny because you do this enough times and you start to think, man, I figured that if I could make millions for my clients as a marketing consultant, those who did accept the ideas, then I should be able to do the same for my own company. My ideas were worth their weight in gold. At least that's what I thought. And I thought that any company, I could just go there and apply marketing and do well for them. And it's not even just one company. Basically, every project that I took on and I looked at this time, I was like, oh man, if we could just sprinkle a little marketing in there, it would take off. We'd make millions of dollars. Now, I'm not going to bury the lead and tell you the verdict of whether you can take over any company and make millions, but it's actually not that easy. There's a lot of challenges that go into it when it comes to entrepreneurship, but I'm just giving you an insight into my mindset circa 2013. Basically, I thought that everything I did, all I needed to do was sprinkle some marketing on it and things would work great. Now, at the end of 2013, I decided to go solo and start building my own business. Now, I had several business ideas I was workshopping and working through, doing them simultaneously, basically doing several things at the same time. And I wasn't sure which one was going to take off, if any of them were, but I knew that these things were not focused on providing services to companies, but more building my own products and then using my marketing skills to attract customers to those products. And the decision was I wanted to have part lifestyle business, but also part lifestyle design, and then partly I just needed to change the scenery. So when I say lifestyle business, I mean a business that doesn't get venture capital funding, something that's 100% owned by me, or if I were to bring in business partners, then they would own part of it too, but no venture capital. Lifestyle design, I wanted something where I could travel and see the world and not have to worry about answering phone calls from clients and whatever else you do. So I was trying to design the lifestyle that I really wanted. And then a change of scenery, things were getting to be too similar and I didn't feel like there's a challenge anymore. So that was my motivations going in to jumping out on my own. And really I was, let's call it naive enough to think that you just sprinkle a little marketing on something and it's going to take off. Basically you see other people who are succeeding from marketing, you think that it's really that easy. Or you even see your own successes and then you think that marketing was the only thing that went in there. But basically what I didn't see, and I'll get into this more as we go through my lessons learned, what I didn't see is that it took a long time for that client to get to the point where they had $1 million e-commerce business in the first place. It wasn't something that they just woke up one day and had $1 million. It was basically a business unit that they had crafted over the course of 20, 30 years that got to the point where it made $1 million. And then basically my marketing was just putting gasoline on top of that, and that's how we got to $3 million. So it's a lot harder to go from $0 to $1 million than it is to go from 1 to 3. And that was a lesson that I guess I've probably always known, but I was naive enough to think that it was really easy to get to $1 million. But anyway, we'll get more into that as we go along. Now, it's been a pretty fun and nerve-wracking journey over the last 3.5 years to figure out what my niche was going to be and where things were going to go. And I just wanted to share with you some discoveries that I've had along the way. And that's really going to be the premise of this episode. And like I said, it might be a little bit shorter than normal. I have an outline of things I'm going to talk about, and I'm just going to talk freely. And I'm looking for input from everybody to see whether you'd want to hear this type of stuff going forward once every 2 weeks. So we'd have an interview 1 week, and then the next week I'd do something like this. Some of them might be essays. We'll see. The format might vary as we go along. But if you're a long-time listener, I'd love to hear from you about what you think about this one. So the first thing that I learned is that a little bit of marketing over a short period of time does not go a long way in the business world. Also, a little bit of marketing over a long period of time doesn't do you any good either. Same with a lot of marketing over a short period of time. It doesn't work. The only way you can really do well and succeed in the business world is to do a lot of marketing over a long period of time. That's the only way you can gain traction. It's the only way you can build a brand. It's really the only sustainable way to get a business up and running and to do well. And so when we talk about marketing over a long period of time, it might take years and years in order to find any traction in what's going on That might be what we evidenced in the $1 million business I was talking about earlier. Then if you can do marketing over and over again, it starts to have an exponential effect. So once you reach your initial goal, marketing will be what helps you gain more and more traction over time. And my conclusion is that this is a long game. You need to be in this thing for the long haul, and it takes a lot longer than you think in order to see success. Now, obviously, I probably knew this before I went out on my own and went into this area, but you forget it. It's easy to forget it because the funny thing is no matter how much success you had under a different name, a different brand, different banner, when you start over, you're starting over from zero. These things didn't exist before, and that's really the problem you go into, is that no matter how much you think you improve something, starting over is really hard. Now, if I were to do this again, or if I were to, go into business for the fourth time in my life, because this is my third time doing this, I might just start with an existing business, right? Purchase a business from somebody who's already done that beginning piece and then grow it even bigger. If you listen back to actually episode 42 with Josh Shogren, he talked about the same thing, is that he realized that it's really hard to build something from scratch. So he just goes and buys something that is already established and then he makes it better. And that's actually probably how I would approach things moving forward as well. The next time that I start a business, if I ever decide to do that again. I'm not sure I'm crazy enough to do that or not. Now, one way that I described this phenomenon was to my friend Sean, because he's a friend of mine who I met in Chiang Mai, and we talk about our businesses and our successes. And I told him that the past 1,000+ days that I've spent building up a business has been like an iceberg. And it feels great because things are finally starting to peek out above the waterline and be noticed. Like you can actually start to see the tip of the iceberg with what I'm doing and what I've been working on the last several years. But there's a whole lot of ice that needed to be accumulated in the bottom in order to breach the surface, in order for anybody to even notice that these things are happening. And that's really a metaphor for brand, life, business, everything all in one, is that you do need to build a foundation. You need to build on top of things before anybody even starts to notice. Now, you've probably heard this a million times. It might even be a cliche at this point, but it's really there. I mean, that's really how it goes, is that it takes a long time to become an overnight success. And usually when you look at case studies from people, when you see people's success stories, they're simplifying that process so much more than what it really is. It's not really that simple. It takes a lot of work. Okay, the next thing I learned, selling services for tens of thousands of dollars can be easier than selling a product for $10. Now, this is a wild one because I definitely did sell my agency services, and I brought in contracts $10,000, $20,000, $100,000+ from a contract selling services to somebody. I'd go in, I'd prepare a sales deck, I'd tell them how much our pricing was, how much things cost to work with our agency, maybe go into their office, maybe do it on the phone, never via email. You never want to send a proposal via email without sharing it with them first. And they'd say yes. Basically, whatever they wanted, whatever concerns they had during the sales process, I was able to walk them through their objections. I was able to propose a solution. So whatever they were getting proposed to them was exactly what they had asked for. And success rate was really high because I gave them what they wanted. But when you're selling a $10 product or a $100 product, whatever the amount is, when you're selling a product, it's completely different, the sales process. It's not nearly as easy to sell these things because you can't customize your sales pitch for a $10 product. You'd never make any money off of it. If you had a salesperson who was calling 10 times to sell a $10 product, you would lose money on it. So you have to have a whole different sales process. You basically need to overcome their objections. You need to tell somebody why they really care about this product. You need to go over the benefits that it's going to provide them. You need to answer the why me question without having a voice, without having the ability to even talk to somebody. That's a whole different side of the brain. And I underestimated that going into things. I thought, well, if I'm really good at selling services for lots of money, then selling something that's not very expensive should be a piece of cake. And it turns out that it's not, because you're not able to customize a solution. You're actually taking things off of the table. So whereas my sales in the past was just add things to the table. Okay, you're not sure you want to work with us. Well, what if we said we'd do this? Okay, we'll sign now. We'll sign the contract. This is the opposite. You basically have to overcome all the objections without even being in front of somebody, with somebody looking in their web browser at your web page and then answering these questions for themselves. And so it's taken a long time, a lot of classes, a lot of trial and error, banging my head against the wall in order to get better at this process. And I'm still not, I still have a ways to go, but it's getting better and better with each passing time. And I'll talk about how I've educated myself both on the job training as well as, buying online courses in just a moment here. But basically, it's different selling services versus selling products. And being good at one does not necessarily mean you're good at the other. It actually probably means that you're not going to be very good at the other. Okay, the third lesson I learned, business is not a zero-sum game. Okay, I've probably known this well before I went on my own in the business world, but I think I understand better how to describe it. Now, let me give you a metaphor. I've been watching a lot of the March Madness basketball tournament, the NCAA tournament, and really any sport is a zero-sum game. One team wins, one team loses, and when you add it up, +1 for the win, -1 for the loss, 0 is the sum. This is a admission, I didn't even understand the term zero-sum game. I never really understood that phrase until I just did the math, like right before this episode of the podcast. So you can make fun of me if you want. Any engagement's good with the podcast. Make fun of me for not knowing what a zero-sum game meant. But anyway, business does not have to be a zero-sum game, right? It's not like there's one champion in business. Many people can make a lot of money off of businesses, and there's a lot of ways to do that. And so when it comes to things like partnerships, usually me working with somebody else and promoting across our lists, doing a partnership, a promotion, that is a 1+1 relationship. So the answer is 2, right? The business is 2 times better or 2 times better off if you work with somebody than if you only work on your own. So it's actually not like sports at all. There's no winner in business. There's actually multiple winners. And so you can relax your competitive nature and you can still win in this place. So it's not always about doing things on your own or just within your company. Partnerships can be really beneficial. And I've done quite a few partnerships actually over the last year, and I have some more coming out. I'm going to New York on Tuesday to record something with Skillshare. And so I've been forming partnerships with all kinds of organizations, and I feel like I'm better off for doing that as opposed to just keeping everything on my own channel and just only, not participating anywhere else. So business is not a zero-sum game. Number 4, sometimes it's worth paying thousands of dollars just for a picture. Now, if you're banging your head against the wall, trying to figure out what you need to do for your business, for your clients, for your situation, for your career, whatever it is, and you're banging your head against the wall, sometimes it's worthwhile to pay somebody who's done this before or who's achieved what you wanted, pay them a premium even in order to get their picture of what success looks like. Now, let me give you an example. Going back to this piece about selling products, how hard it is to sell products online if you are used to selling services, there are people who are doing really well at selling products online. Derek Halpern comes to mind. He's really good at what he does. Jeff Walker, the product launch formula. There's all kinds of people that I've been following. Ryan Levesque's one of them. There's all these, even Neil Patel, Brian Dean at Backlinko. There's all kinds of people who are really good at selling their products, or they perceive to be good. You don't actually see their sales numbers, but you assume that they're doing really well because they're everywhere. And so if they're successful and they're selling a product that tells you about how you can be successful, you might know 99% of what's in their course, or you can read a lot of that stuff for free. A lot of the stuff that's available is available for free, but sometimes just seeing the picture of how their brain works and just having it spelled out for you can be priceless. And so I've paid, quite a bit of money over the past year in order to see other people's pictures, in order to piece it together, because sometimes that's the one thing that's lacking, is all the components, but you don't know how the puzzle's put together. And so I think sometimes it is worth paying money for that, and quite a bit of money. And for those of you, this is a small plug here, and that is my agency course is doing the same thing. So I basically pieced together the picture of what a successful agency looks like, what it looks like when you have extreme profits, what profit margins you should go for, how to make money being a freelancer or an agency owner. And I've put together a successful career that I had and that I've seen others have, and I basically put it into a package to say, here's what the picture looks like, here's the steps you need to do if you want to succeed there. And actually, I think that's super valuable for people to have that picture if they're struggling with it, if they thought about going out on their own and they're not being successful, or if they have gone on their own and that things aren't working how they wanted to. Sometimes that little piece is what pushes you over the edge. The other thing is that you should never stop learning. So this is number 5, never stop learning. Now, you may not need an MBA to be in business. You don't need an MBA to be in business, right? It doesn't hurt to have gone to school to learn how to run a business or how a business should work. Now, I don't have an MBA. I haven't taken a grad class. Somehow I'm able to teach at a university, which surprises me every single day, because I thought you needed an MBA to teach. But I've basically invested my own money into the School of Hard Knocks. So I spent somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 just in the last 6 months learning new things, buying online courses, buying programs, coaching, all kinds of different things, just in order to get better at this, basically the selling products and building products piece of the equation. And so you can be successful in one area, but you should never stop learning, and you should never stop investing in making yourself better equipped to do what you're doing, whether it's in your career so you can get paid more in your job, or whether it's in your entrepreneurship plunge, whatever you're doing, never stop investing. Now, if you're doing it for your job, maybe your employer will invest for you, but you can go to conferences, you can do all kinds of things in order to learn more. But I'd say a good benchmark is probably $5,000 to $10,000 a year just in learning new things, in the value or the retail cost of what you learn over a course of time. So never stop learning. That's number 5. All right, moving on to number 6. Success is not a zero-sum game. So we've defined what zero-sum game means earlier, and we talked about business not being there. Neither is success. You can have multiple successful people in the same area, in the same industry, doing the exact same thing. In fact, the more the people collaborate, the more you're going to be able to reach overall. Google has a free training program that teaches people Google Analytics, and yet thousands of people have taken my courses as well. So it doesn't mean that just because something else is out there that people aren't going to find what you're looking for. And in fact, you should embrace it. You should team up with the Googles in the world and say, hey, let's cross-promote. Let's get out there, and I'll send people into your free class. If you can tell them if they want something more advanced, then they can go over to mine. It doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. There can be multiple successful people, businesses, whatever it is in this industry. Number 7, being an entrepreneur is manic, especially when you're going solo at this whole thing. So I don't want to say that I don't have people involved with my own journey into entrepreneurship, because that's not the case. But as the sole owner of my company that's trying to grow, the sole burden for the successes and failures falls on me. And that can be nice when things go well, right? It's invigorating, adrenaline rush. It just feels awesome when things go according to plan. But when things don't, it can be depressing, defeating, and just overall blah when the things don't work out for you. And I'll give you an example. Just yesterday, I went from being depressed about something that wasn't working very well to head over heels excited, all in the span of about 2 seconds. And it's funny because you read an email, or you're waiting on an email, it doesn't come, or it's not what you want it to say, and then something good comes in. And basically, you can just go from super depressed to super happy, or from super happy to super depressed. I think the key that I've learned in business, to be honest, is that you just need to get more positives than negatives, and you have to weight them 1-to-1. You can't weight them 5-to-1 like a lot of people do. What I mean by that is you can't take 5 good comments and then think that's equal to 1 bad comment. That's not how it works, and it shouldn't work that way. If you have 5 good comments, that's 4 more than your 1 bad comment. Don't treat them the same. But people have a tendency to do that. They think that 1 bad thing is just so much worse. You can't do that if you want to stay sane. And even if you think that you're sane, if you do, you have a good mental attitude to all this stuff, it's still pretty manic, the entrepreneurship piece. So that actually leads me to our next point, and that's number 8. You will become hardened. You will develop a thick skin. And you might even become more guarded if you go into entrepreneurship, especially when you're going at it on your own and you put a lot of pressure on yourself. Is that good or bad? I don't know. I think that I can handle situations better in general now than I could 4 or 5 years ago. If something doesn't go right, I've developed the ability to talk myself into patience and letting things turn themselves around. Basically, taught myself to deal with adversity and to not let it get in the way. And that's really important. And it's not just something that's valuable in business, it's valuable in life in general, is that you can really become more complete with the way that you do things. Instead of just hoping that things would work, you start to, when you're hardened and you have a thick skin, you start to say, well, how do I make sure this does work? Instead of hoping, how do I stack the deck in my favor? Do as much as you can, right? Another one, number 9, being your own boss means that you have to be the bad guy sometimes. You need to tell yourself when the things you're doing aren't good enough. I just mentioned that in number 8, how don't come with weak things, come correct, so you can actually make sure that you get what you want out of it. Even if you'd rather take a day off than to redo something to make sure that it's perfect. Even if you don't want to get out of bed, you have to do it. You have to put on your pants. You have to send that email. You have to stay up late to take that phone call. I spent the entire winter in Thailand. I was in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and when I went to bed at 10 o'clock at night, that was 9 o'clock in the morning in the Central Time. And so basically my evenings were when the U.S. was just starting to wake up, and when I went to sleep, that was the whole business day. And then I'd wake up, and if something good happened, I'd be like, hey, this made my day. And if something bad happened the day before, overnight, then it ruined my day. And basically, my days were often dictated by whether the good things happened or bad things happened. The other thing is that I had to stay up late quite a bit just in order to make sure that people could join my phone calls, or if I did training, or if I talked to people, it would be up late. It was pretty frustrating. But you know what? I needed to stay motivated. I needed to keep being my own boss because there's nobody else to hold me accountable. Like, the world doesn't care about your business. The nature of the world is that your business shouldn't be there, right? The business shouldn't exist just because you want it to. And so you need to keep on surviving. You need to keep on putting things in place to make sure that it does survive and thrive. And that's really how this all works. And so if you're your own boss, you're the only one who can keep yourself accountable for that. And so you have to put on multiple hats. You have to do this if you want this thing to exist. And I think this is not just an entrepreneurial thing. This is something we should all understand. And that is that to succeed, just to be above average, is not normal. It's not something that is expected. So you need to expect that of yourself, and you need to work to preserve that. Otherwise, you're going to regress to the mean. Statistically, we're all supposed to be average. That's how this all works, right? So if you want to be on top, if you want to be above average, you have to work in order to make sure that happens. It's the only way to do it, because otherwise the world's going to take it back. Things are going to be pushing you back down to that mean, to that average, where you can regress. So a little statistics lesson there. If you're an actual math person, I'm not a statistician myself. If I got that wrong, let me know. Again, engage with this podcast. It'll be a lot more meaningful for both of us. Number 10, find new chips to put on your shoulder. This has been a big one for me. I had mentioned earlier, business is not a zero-sum game, but if you can't have momentum going, if momentum just stops, then nothing happens, right? Things go on the decline. Basically, business is a gravity game, let's put it that way. So if you're a rocket ship and you're taking off and you're propelling yourself, you need to keep on feeling that. Otherwise, eventually it's going to come back down. It's going to come back down a lot faster than you think. So business might not be a zero-sum game, but business is a rocket ship. And so you need to have the ability to steer, you need to have the rocket boosters, and you need to have a lot of fuel if you want to succeed in this area. And adding to that, number 11, adversity is a wonder drug. Adversity, not getting things the way that you want them to, it can either push you into depression or it can motivate you and make you want to change things. And I think that one of the things you have to do as an entrepreneur, that I've had to do as an entrepreneur, is to retrain my brain in order to look at adversity not as like a hindrance, but to say, oh, I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to use this as fuel. And so ultimately that's what I've had to do, is to take the little things, whether it's adversity, challenges, whatever it is, and to turn it into the next round, the next wave, in order to stay motivated, because it's just how it goes. And the last one is that what I've done over the last 3.5 years, almost 4 years now, is the best decision that I've made and that I could have made. It wasn't always easy. It wasn't always clear or clean. I didn't always have a good idea as to what was happening. But investing in building up a business and investing in myself and investing in this brand, this ability to have a foundation, something that basically starts to perpetuate itself, something that really makes each future move a lot easier, basically building that iceberg, that was a great decision to make. I wish I'd have made it even longer ago. But basically, it's never too early in the process to invest in this, and it's never too late either. You can invest in building up your iceberg, your brand, your unsinkable ship, whatever you want to call it. But it does take time. It probably takes somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 days in order to get to that point where you can really, truly see the success you're looking for. And you have to use the little micro successes in order to hope that it's going to take form in the way of a macro success. But I'm glad that I invested 3.5 years in doing this, because the next 3.5 to 4 years are going to be tremendous. They're going to be so much better than I could imagine, because basically I'm putting my company in the position where somebody can come in and take us from one point to another point, sort of like what I talked about at the starting of this episode. Basically, if you don't build something in the first place, then you're not going to be able to have that consultant, that marketing genius, whatever you want to call it, come in and put the gasoline on the fire and to grow your business significantly, by millions of dollars. If you can't get to that first step, then that second step is out of the question. And so I'm very glad that I went through this process, that I made that investment. And I think that if you're on the fence about doing this or thinking about it, then hopefully this is helpful for you. If you're never going to be an entrepreneur, then I can see where this might not be helpful, but I think you could apply it to your career as well. But I really wanted to just get onto the microphone and talk about something, because I do think this would be a fun little segment to do on the podcast. So again, I'm looking forward to your feedback. Should we go to a weekly podcast once a week where I interview somebody? Once every other week where I interview somebody, and then once a week where I talk about something? Could be a rough outline like this where I fill in the blanks, or it could be more of a polished essay type episode. So I'd love to hear your feedback on what you think about this evolution of the Jumpstart podcast. So that's it for this episode. Visit Jeffalytics.com/reflections for show notes. And if you found it interesting, please leave a comment on that page, or send me an email, jeff@jeffalytics.com, or tweet me, whatever it ends up being, @Jeffalytics, and let me know if I should create more episodes of this nature. Look forward to talking to you soon.